Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning, I should say today, and welcome to this webinar, The Essentials of Monitor Calibration, Printer and Output Calibration. This is a webinar with Richard West presented to you from Datacolor. I'm Boris Bergman from Datacolor, and I would like to say great to have you here this morning. And it will Richard West do the presentation now, and I will hand you now to Richard. The presentation will take about an hour, a little bit less or a little bit more, and afterwards we will go into a chat where you have the ability to enter all the questions you have, and Richard and I, we will answer all of them. Rich, are you with me here?
I am indeed. Thanks, Boris. Yes, all good.
Okay.
Ready and waiting. So.
Good. So what I will do now, I will transfer over to you so you can share your screen with us. Please do so.
Cool. Good stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
We can see you and we can hear you. Okay. It's your turn now.
Thanks. Great. Okay. Thanks, mate. Right. Good morning, folks. In particular, good morning to the U3A guys in Camberley. Thank you very much for their arranging, and for Peter Ramsey for arranging this session this morning. They very kindly let us open this up to a few others. So we've got a couple of other people on the webinar this morning. So good morning to all those elsewhere. But as I say, in particular, thanks to the folks at the University of the Third Age, the Camberley chapter. So what they've asked for today, and what we're going to be covering off, is really trying to give you an understanding of monitor, printer, and output calibration. So hopefully this is coming through loud and strong in particular in Camberley. If anybody isn't getting me, please drop us a chat. I'm not able to answer questions at the same time as talking, though, so therefore we leave the questions and answers bit until later on. But I will endeavour to answer all questions at the end. Hopefully we'll answer some of those questions that you have as we run along through this session, basically. But today's going to be a mixture of bit of presentation slides, bit of software, and hopefully a bit of knowledge for you as well. So let's kick into it. We're going to be talking about, as mentioned, calibration, more at the print end of things. But of course, the same thing applies with this as far as calibration is concerned. What we're really talking about is getting your colours correct. Getting you into that lovely situation people refer to in all the graphic arts as a sort of a WYSIWYG environment, what you see is what you get environment. And that's really what we're looking at it from a photography point of view today, but of course this is applicable across a whole vast array of different environments, such as video as well nowadays, graphic arts, design and printing, and also, of course, 3D printing. Now, some of you may be getting into 3D printing, but same thing applies really. And of course, one of the key things we're trying to do for all of you is get to that situation where, when you go to output, when you go to print, primarily, you end up with getting your end result correct, getting it coming out the way you were previously looking at it, for instance, on computer. And of course, that in print, when you're talking about 2D print, when you're talking about conventional sticking it on a printer, can be an expensive thing to get right if you don't set up your system correctly in the first place. That's what we're going to cover off today, how to get it right. But if you think, a lot of people out there that I speak to end up doing this sort of cyclical, okay, I'll see my images on my screen, I'll print them out, they don't come out exactly the way I want, so that maybe they come out a bit too light, a bit too dark, a bit too faded, whatever it may be, so therefore they retouch those images and print out again, and it comes out not quite right again, so they then retouch and print out again. So there is this cyclical situation that you can get into, which of course costs you and wastes time and print, ink, paper, and of course money. Well, if you think of that in 3D terms, of course, if you do end up going into 3D printing, 3D substrates can be a heck of a lot more expensive, so therefore you really want to get it right in 3D print. But we're going to focus on 2D today. We're going to focus on photography. In particular, we're going to look at this sort of angelic, utopic world that we're trying to get correct here. So basically, we're trying to get you into the situation where throughout your workflow, the same colors in particular come out. I.e., when I see something, in this example here we've got on screen, we're seeing something, vaguely black and white image. We're taking a black and white image, we're taking that neutral image into our workflow, we're retouching it at step 3 there and having a look at it on different types of displays, for instance, but we want those displays to match wherever possible anyway. And of course, as mentioned, most importantly, when we send that to print out, we want it to get it coming out from print as near as possible as it was to what we saw in the first place and what we saw on screen. Now, I'm very definite in separating out what we saw in the first place and what we saw on screen there, because these can be two different things. And we're going to cover that off as well, basically, as we go through the session today. But hopefully with all of this, you're going to get an understanding of how to get the colors correct. We are going to first and foremost start at the back end of the process. So we're going to look at this output side of things, because as mentioned, that can be where the biggest or most obvious and most costly changes that color management can correct can come in if you're not correcting for it. Because we've got this thing called paper and ink and different types of printers, basically. So therefore, if we've got lots of different types of paper out there, we know, for instance, some of you out there may have worked in a newspaper environment or certainly read a newspaper at some point in the past. Others may be used to seeing images in magazines, but of course, with all these situations, we're probably used to the fact that the same image, when we see it in a magazine, we've probably seen the same sort of images in magazines and newspapers, and for that matter nowadays on the internet. We know that there's a deterioration, perhaps, or certainly an effect that can happen, in particular when we get a newspaper print. Stick an image into newspaper print, and it can become very contrasty, very filled in. So therefore, it's classically down to the fact that newspaper print itself is quite absorbent, sort of compared to blotting paper, and so therefore that can have a big impact on your images. Now, we're used to that. We're also used to seeing better images in magazines and better images still on the internet, as far as the clarity, as far as the sharpness, as far as the colors are concerned. Now, that's what we're trying to correct. That's what we're going to try and get you to the situation of understanding, or we all understand, I'm sure, that effect is happening. But of course, the key thing here is that effect can be a good thing as well. Not necessarily in the newsprint example, but different types of paper open up different opportunities to create different styles of image. So different types of paper stock can, as you can see on screen, have a metallic effect, apply a metallic effect, apply a more burnt out effect. If you think about certain images, they're probably going to be more appropriate to, for instance, a gloss type of stock. So nice glossy, lustrous images like this are going to appear better on a gloss stock. And likewise, the sort of images you get from more sort of creative, artistic approaches can work better on canvas. So suddenly this paper effect, which in some places can be detrimental, can also be a benefit as well. You can actually get more out of your images if you put them on the right type of paper, the right type of stock, use the right type of printer, for instance, as well, and also framing as well. But paper is something that we can take into account. And so what we're going to try and encourage you to do today is add in some extra steps in your workflow. So foremost of this is something called soft proofing. And what we're looking at now is the idea that, okay, when we've captured, we're not just going to take our images into our computer and retouch them. We're actually going to add in a couple of stages in that retouching, that viewing process. So this is supposed to be the same screen now over a period of time down the bottom of the screen here. And we're adding this extra couple of stages of soft proofing and adjusting. Because what we want to be able to do is, if, for instance, we've got some sort of effect that's being created due to output. Now, that output could be just putting your images out onto the internet, but to be honest, there's not going to be a great deal of effect there, depending on how color accurate you want to be. But as mentioned, if you're sticking onto paper, or for that matter onto 3D imaging, but we're focusing on paper here, then that's where perhaps sticking on a yellow stock, as we're sort of suggesting in this scenario here, can have a pronounced effect on your output, on your images. So that's where we need to include at that soft proofing stage in the middle there, the ability to see what effect that's going to be. Now, the choice then is up to you, whether if you like that effect, you adjust, you leave it in there, or if you don't, you adjust as much as you can to remove that effect. Now, I'm using the term as much as you can because, of course, that can be something that is just inherent in what you're doing. You'll see in a couple of seconds when I come out and show you some examples here, certain printers just won't have the capability of reproducing what you saw in the first place because if you think about a photocopier, for instance, it's not going to be necessarily as good quality a printer as, for instance, a magazine press, that sort of scenario, or a high quality inkjet printer. So if you do want to remove that effect, that's where this adjustment stage is coming in. And if you can adjust and remove that effect, then ultimately that will lead to you getting something coming out of print that's as good as possible to your starting point. Now, in order to do this, we're going to look at how we can soft-proof in various different types of software. One of the things you're going to need to bear in mind that you might need to get is a calibration device like the one just popped up on screen, the Spider Print, which allows you to calibrate your printers. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a little while, but the good thing, in inverted commas, is the fact that a lot of us nowadays don't necessarily print out ourselves anyway. But if we do, then effectively you're not necessarily going to need to get a calibration device for print unless you're doing a couple of things. Either if you are wanting to get your colors absolutely accurate, because you really need to have them accurate. Now, generally that could be because you're either A, selling those prints, or B, wanting to win a licensure or an association placement in a society. Those would be the only criteria really where I'd suggest you need to be looking at a calibration device for your printing. Otherwise, we're going to show you how we can get profiles, which are what was created by a calibration device, a little descriptive file that tells you how your printers print out. And basically, you can get those, or get generic ones, for free. So we'll come to how you can do that. But let's first of all have a look at this soft proofing phase, basically. Let's see what we can do. So we're going to pop out of here, out of the presentation, and we're going to nip into, first and foremost, we'll go into Lightroom. Now, in Lightroom, I spoke to Peter from Cambly yesterday, who suggested that this was a pretty common tool for a lot of the users there. But we'll show you Photoshop, for instance, later on. I mean, what we're going to do is look at how to soft-proof your images, how to do that emulation of output. So generally speaking, most softwares nowadays allow this to happen. I have to say, unfortunately, I don't believe that Photos from Apple actually does, whereas its predecessors, for instance, in the form of Aperture, did. So a bit of a shame that they seem to have lost this ability there, but certainly in Lightroom, it's probably, as far as I'm concerned, the best of breed as far as soft proofing is concerned. So I present a lot around the country and elsewhere around Europe, and ultimately, every time I show this sort of facility, I get told by a lot of people, oh, they haven't actually tried it before, or they may have hit it but they didn't know what it did. So hopefully this is going to educate yourselves today as to what it is that we're covering off here. Effectively, in the Lightroom module, you've got well, in the Lightroom software, you've got various different modules. You've got the library module, which lets you see the different groups or projects that you've got on the go. You've got the develop module, which is essentially your retouching part. So it comes with a whole bunch of retouching capabilities over here on the right-hand side in the software. And you've also got a whole bunch of presets over here on the left-hand side, which are effects you can apply quickly and easily to your images to correct them. Now, one of the good things about presets is that you don't have to just apply these preset adjustments to one image. You can very easily select a whole bunch of images and apply those presets to all of them in one go. And that's very important, and it's going to prove to be very important and very useful from a color management point of view. Because what we want to do is look at this particular button down here on the sort of bottom left-hand side of the viewer window. It's called soft proofing. Now, secret's in the name. Basically, if you click on soft proofing, two things are going to happen. Firstly, we're going to see an effect applied to our images there. And in fact, if I hit the Y key, you'll be able to see the before and after there of that effect. And secondly, on the right-hand side, up underneath this histogram, this graph, you're going to see something called profile. Now, as I say, profiles are little descriptive files that tell computers, screens, etc., the colors that are available within the particular color space. So in this instance, I'm looking at lots of different types of print output. I've got some, for instance, a permajet paper watercolor profile there. I've got other different types of profiles. So I've got some generic profiles here that have come from the internet. So this is a US newsprint profile, and you're seeing every time I change these profiles on the right-hand side, you're seeing an emulation of an output. So therefore, this is suggesting generically this is how this image would look on newsprint, for instance. And I'm just clicking on this sort of drop-down menu. If I want to add any others in, let's go into the other menu. And what this is doing is it's accessing into our profiles folder, which has got all these little descriptive folders on in this case my Macintosh. Now, for instance, I want to drop in some luster stock paper from PhotoSpeed, then I can do that, and straight away you're seeing a subtle difference there. But if we zoom in, you can perhaps see the difference across the rhino there as we're moving across, slightly darker, but you'd expect that with a luster stock on a decent printer there, because ultimately it should be fairly accurate to what we're seeing in the first place. But if I have a look, for instance, at my my photocopier fax machine that I happen to have, which is a Codec device, but no slide on Codec here. It's not really aimed at color printing in a professional fashion. What we're getting here is obviously a fairly pronounced effect, which hopefully, even if you're watching this on a projector or watching this elsewhere, you'll be able to see that there's a difference between the before and after. And this is the key thing. This is that soft proofing stage that we were talking about in the suggested workflow, because this is giving you that opportunity to see the effect that the print, the ink, etc. So the printer, the ink, and the paper basically are having, in this case, on your output. Now, you could actually be soft proofing against other things like, for instance, sRGB. sRGB would be the standard suggested soft proof for going out to the internet. You'll see that really there should be no visible difference there, I would imagine, to most people viewing this particular file at the moment. But so if I pop back to that more generic stuff, let's choose just a gloss stock on my my Epson printer here. You can see it's making it slightly darker on the right-hand side. So key thing is we're seeing how things are going to come out. If we prefer that nice darkened image on the right-hand side, great. But if we want to get it back to how we were looking at it on the left-hand side, i.e. after we've been retouching, all we need to do is basically to go into our retouch palette over here on the right-hand side of, in this case, Lightroom, and make some adjustments, and basically get that right-hand side looking as much as possible like it does on the left-hand side. So if I just crank up the exposure a little bit, the good thing about Lightroom is it automatically creates a proof copy, or it can do anyway. So we're going to create a proof copy here, so you're not adjusting necessarily the original version, you're adjusting a new version. But let's just adjust that such that we can create some sort of adjustment which gets it looking pretty much as much as it can do on the right-hand side of the line compared to the left-hand side. Now, in this case, on a nice Epson printer with some luster stock, again, you're not expecting to see a major difference here. So I'm just going to leave it with that slight change in exposure. But in order to create that preset that we were talking about, so this is what we want to do. We want to create a preset which is this adjustment stage of the workflow that we can apply then to lots of other images we want to print out on the same paper, ink, and stock. Then we just need to go up to the develop mode within Lightroom and drop down and create a new preset. And at this point, we can give that a name. We'll just call that new, and in fact, we'll put new at the start as well, so we can see very easily where that is on our list of presets. Boom, there we are. We've now created it. So we've got new Epson R800, 1800 gloss luster new. So that now can be easily applied to whatever other images we want. We just choose as many as we want and apply the preset just by clicking it, and it's going to apply that preset out to that output and correct for output basically. So hopefully that's getting your head around soft proofing, and as I say, getting your head around the joys of being able to get things ready for output, basically. So that's a key important part of not wasting ink, because this is doing that process that we talked about earlier on, where, for instance, you could just be retouching or looking at your images on your computers, printing out, finding out there's too light, and therefore having to go back in, adjust the brightness, the darkness, etc., so print again, etc., etc. This is saving you all that ink, paper, and time by just allowing you to do that automatically. So again, it's hit the soft proofing button, make some adjustments. As I say, hit the Y key, gives you that split of before and after. Make some adjustments and save that as a preset underneath that develop setting up there. And key thing with this is you need to be doing this for every type of paper, ink, and printer that you use. Now, as mentioned, a lot of us don't necessarily print out ourselves, so therefore we can actually download these profiles. So if you do that, there's a whole bunch of different places you can be going to allow this to happen. So we've got different partners out there that produce profiles for you as well, but generically, if you go to any sort of printer manufacturer, the Epsons, the Canons, etc., etc., they will have somewhere on their website a means by which you can download those presets. And alternatively, if you go to a paper manufacturer, for instance, they'll have some presets done, or profiles, I should say, beg your pardon, not presets, profiles done for you that allow you to see those outputs. Now, let's just quickly show you what a profile is and where to put it. Now, I'm going to have to obviously show you on a Macintosh here, because I can't show you a Windows machine and a Mac at the same time, unfortunately. But on the Macintosh, it's a case of going down to the library folder, going into color sync and going into profiles, and that's where you add in your profiles. And for instance, that's where we got some different profiles. Here they are, 1.7 megabytes of file. You just need to drop the profiles into your profiles folder, and they're small. These are typically there's an 808 kilobyte profile there. They're typically small profiles, and as I say, it's really just describing the color space that you can see in that environment. As mentioned, if you're downloading these, or if you're talking to professional printers, they should be able to supply you them or have them on their website already. And it's just a case of on the Mac, library, color sync, profiles. On Windows, it is, again, just popping it into your profiles folder there. Unfortunately, I can't show you that as we speak. What I can show you, though, is potentially something that's helpful. That's what a profiles look like. So for instance, a profile is really a color space. And this is the color space. This is the Adobe RGB color space. I'm showing you this in the color sync utility on the Mac. Now, this is the utility, comes free, included in the Macintosh operating system. And basically, you go applications, utilities down the bottom of that, and then you'll see the color sync utility in there. There's nothing quite similar built into the Windows operating system, I'm afraid, but you can download certain applications like Color that will do similar sort of stuff, but not in a 3D. Or we're going to be talking about Data Color's Spider calibration devices later on for screen calibration. Now, they come with a facility that allows you to see pretty much what we're showing here as well, more in a 2D fashion. But basically, what we're showing you here is a representation of the colors you can see in Adobe RGB. Now, I can compare that with, for instance, sRGB. So if I show you sRGB, there is the colored area, and Adobe RGB is the white area around the outside. You can see there that Adobe RGB is about 25% bigger than sRGB. Now, when we have a look at some of those profiles for print, there's one of those profiles there for soft proofing for print. You can see there that print profile is a lot smaller than Adobe RGB. So therefore, it actually there's a mapping process that carries on in when you're converting to print, which fundamentally is what you're seeing when you're doing that soft proofing as well. It's giving you that opportunity to proof against those profiles. And let's just have a quick look at one other profile here. Let's have a look at, for the time being, have a look at the Codec profile. We were showing you my photocopy. I just need to find it down here. I think it's probably tucked away in one of my other folders on here. So there we are. There's the Codec plain paper profile. Now, instantly there, you can perhaps see why that Codec profile, when I was showing you it, looked so washed out. Because essentially what it's saying is it just really doesn't have the ability to put a lot of color onto your printer. And in fact, you can see here it's got very little capability of producing black. This is quite important to see, really, because if you can tell if you're going to be printing out on something that hasn't got the capability of producing enough black, for instance, you straight away know that, okay, that adjustment stage we were talking about here in our workflow, we could adjust until the cows come home, and we wouldn't be able to get enough black into our images when they go to print, because the capability of that printer, paper and stock just don't allow you to put enough black down there. It will be grey as opposed to black. So useful if you can check the profiles for where you're going to be printing first in a fashion like this, so that you can save yourself the time of trying to retouch in something like Lightroom or Photoshop. By the way, quickly show you Photoshop before we move on. In Photoshop, the soft proofing stage is available under the View menu, and this tends to be the case with most other softwares. If you go into the proof setup under Photoshop, usually it's in View, basically in the View menu in various different softwares. Go to Custom Setup, and then in there, you'll have seen it applied there, but there again, there is my soft proof of my Codec plain paper proof there, but I've got all the list of different types of profiling that I've got for my different types of output there available. So if I just go up here and choose, let's choose a satin stock there, so you're seeing a profile there. So let's just pop back on our Codec profile, so you can hopefully definitely see this across the joys of the internet. So they are soft proofing there. And once you've applied that profile and chosen the one you want to be working on, you can actually just hit the Command Y key to turn that on and off to see the effect that that's having when you're going to output. And then, of course, in Photoshop here, it would be a case of perhaps creating a correction layer to adjust for that, if you do feel that you want to adjust for that to get that image looking better, or perhaps setting up some actions. It has to be said that this is where I find Lightroom considerably easier for this soft proofing process, because it is just the press of a button and you're soft proofing, and then of course you're able to apply that correction, create that preset very easily, and create that correction to as many images as you want visually. You can visually check it, and you're not getting that multiplication of file sizes because of the layers being created there. You're only getting a little, it's actually a smart adjustment, if you like, a metadata adjustment that's being created as an adjustment to your images to visualize what it's going to look like. Only when you actually create a print or set your image to output will you actually get a new version being created. So, a bit laborious, but hopefully that sort of set the scene for what we're talking about as far as color management is concerned at the print end of things. And key thing about this is, say, if you are in a situation where you want to be getting those colors spot on for whatever reason, be that to sell to other people or to basically win your licenseship, and you are printing yourself, that's when you do need to be able to simulate your own printers yourself. That's when I would suggest the only time when you need to look at something like a spider print for calibration. And a spider print is a very easy to use device. Datacolor make whole. Well, the entirety of Datacolor is purely built around color management. Basically, that's what the company is geared around in lots of different industries. But the spider print is essentially the same technology that's built into some of their multi-thousand-pound devices. But in the case of the spider print, list price in the UK anyway is £299 or something like that. It is effectively quite an expensive bit, certainly compared to the rest of the types of devices we're going to be talking about today for color management. And that's why I say, generally speaking, if you are working in photography as a hobby, you really just need to download those free profiles from whatever print company or paper or printer manufacturer that you can get out there. But as I say, if you do need to get it correct, the spider print is the device for getting things spot on. It's a USB-based device, plugs into Mac or PC, comes with software to run on the Mac or PC. That software, you run it, it first and foremost allows you to print out on each stock, i.e. each paper, with each printer that you've got, and obviously the types of inks in there, the sort of color charts that you're seeing being read here. You get multiple pages of this, and that allows you then to use this spider print device and effectively you just read a line at a time the colors that are on those patches, and that feeds back into the software. The software tells you when to move on to the next line when it's read each line. It sounds a bit arduous, and it can take 10 or 15 minutes to run a profile for a set of papers. But ultimately, that's time well spent if it's going to save you money and time later on in retouching, basically. So, very easy to use device. It is just a case of popping it on there and following the software and pressing the button and sliding the device across in that guide. That guide is one of the bits that saves you lots of money, though, because as opposed to you having to pay thousands of pounds for a movable flatbed to put the optics and the light source at the right place, what the guide is doing is you're moving it and you're just using it to guide yourself along the line, just so you can press once at the start of the line and slide across your device within that guide. Very easy to use. And that will read a line at a time and build up that profile. Now, this is a device specific for print, and it is important that it's specific for print, because there are other devices out there that purport to do screen calibration, which we're going to come to in a second, and print calibration. Personally, I wouldn't recommend them, because rather like my photocopier fax scanner device, multi-functioning devices aren't necessarily going to be the be-all and end-all of any one particular requirement. And calibration of print is very different from what we're going to come to in a second, which is calibration of screens. So let's move on. Let's leave the print side of things now. Let's look at what else we need to think about. And of course, that is what we've just been talking about, really. We've covered off that soft proofing phase now. So we've got you seeing on print what's going to come out before you've actually printed it by soft proofing against those print profiles. By the way, those print profiles you're creating there are profiled to an international standard. So it's the same international standard used by all the different operating system manufacturers, pretty much. I'm not including Google in there, but certainly Microsoft, Apple, and different hardware manufacturers and different screen manufacturers and printer manufacturers. So the Canons, the Epsons, the ISOs, the NECs, etc., all work to the same standard, so that we're all looking at a standard. Well, of course, one of the things that can go wrong is what you are seeing. Because if you are seeing something that isn't correct on your screen, and you're using that as your guideline for what's going to come out on print, then you are potentially going to end up misguiding yourself and adjusting for things that aren't there. Now, key thing about this is screens. They're all different. They all show things differently. Some of you are currently looking at a projector screen, I'm hoping anyway. You'll be looking at something that is definitely manifestly different, most likely, than the screen on the computer that's driving it, color-wise. And likewise, looking at my laptop compared to the other computer screens that I've got connected to it. If I didn't calibrate them, they could be different, because different manufacturers, different screens as they age, will show things differently. And this can affect the way you're all working. So, quick bit of audience participation here. I've put this little couple of squares up. What I'm going to ask you to do is focus on the little white dot in the center. Keep focusing on that little white dot. We're just going to change some background here. Keep focusing on that little white dot, and then keep focusing on that dot as we change to these two images. Now, for me, and I've only been looking at it for a few seconds, the image on the left is looking a lot redder than the image on the right. This may be coming across for others. However, if you're not in a great lighting environment on the projector, perhaps it won't be coming across. But if it is, you should be seeing a difference, or you are most likely, I should say, seeing a difference. If you're colorblind, perhaps you're not. However, the images are exactly the same. They are just a cut and paste of the same image. What we're trying to point out to you here is that your eyes can deceive you. So that's not necessarily going to be the best way of calibrating your screen. Also, a little bit of fun. Quick question, folks. Obviously, I can't see your feedback, but you can take a show of hands or just mental note to yourself. Which is the lighter square, square A or square B? Square A or square B? Well, give you a few seconds to think about it, and then we'll tell you that actually they're both exactly the same. And Even now, you're probably still being deceived slightly by the fact that there's a dark-coloured B and a light-coloured A. But of course, what's happening here is your brain is thinking, well, we can see the checkerboard pattern. We know how checkerboard patterns work. We can see the cylinder, therefore, obviously the cylinder's creating a shadow. Therefore, yeah, we know B's light. No, hang on. They're the same. And the purpose of this is to say to you, okay, if what you need to do to check that what you're looking at is correct, such that you can soft-proof, such that you can check that if you're sending images somewhere else, they're going to be viewed the same because they're working to the same standard, then what you can't do, unless you are very rare, is calibrate yourself using just the controls on your screens to do that. You need something to help you with. And of course, there is obviously a solution. That solution comes in the form of screen calibration, i.e. devices that you can attach to your screens that read the colors emitted by those screens. Now, the Spider 5 came out last year. It's the latest iteration from the market-leading Spider screen calibrator from Datacolor. And effectively, it's the device that I use and the one that I would highly recommend anybody else to use, partly because I think it's the best of breed out there. I think the surveys by various different magazines and so on have proven it to be streets ahead as far as calibration is concerned, but largely in my case because I travel a lot, and therefore I need something that when I get to a new site, a new venue, if I want to be either retouching images or looking at images and showing images to people, I need to calibrate again. So therefore, one of the big things that happened with Spider 5 was it was re-engineered to make it portable. Previously, calibration devices have been more aimed at something that's going to work in a studio, never move anywhere. But as we've all started working on, in particular, laptops, having an ability to transport your calibration device with you has become more and more required. And that's exactly why Spider 5 is the only device I know on the marketplace that is really portable. It comes now with the counterbalances is there to help you hang the device over the screen so you can calibrate your screens, but it's there also to make sure that basically when you calibrate, once you've calibrated, you can pop the counterbalance onto the screen, onto the sensor of the Spider as a lens cap, so it protects the optics. The optics themselves have been encapsulated in a type of sort of supportive resin type environment, so essentially is now much more protected. Also added in things like the screw mount. You can just see it on the side of the Spider there, such that that Spider can be tripod mounted onto a tripod or a lighting stand. And therefore, if you're doing anything bigger like large TV screens, you can actually calibrate those with this as well, rather than having to hang it over the TV. You can rest it against it to do that calibration, basically. So definitely redesigned to be much more portable. More importantly, from a technical point of view, it's now capable of handling 4K, 5K screens, OLEDs, projectors, curved screens as well, so all the new types of screens out there. Similar process to things you may have used or seen in the past. Basically, you run the software, Mac or PC, on your computers, and effectively you just connect your Spider via USB. The Spider software runs a whole bunch of color swatches in front of the optics, the eye of the device, and the Spider reads those colors. Now, there is more than the, I think, 4 or 5 that you've just seen. There's a whole, about 3 or 4, first time around 5 minutes worth of color that those colors are red, and it just gives various different shades and allows you to do important things like setting the white point for your screens to get the brightness correct as well, so you can basically get that emulating the whiteness of paper on screen, so you get the right sort of color balance, if you like, or white balance for your output as well. So you're actually, there's a lot of reason why people get images coming out from print companies looking too dark or too light is because they haven't got that white balance set up in the first place for their screen calibration. So that's exactly what we're doing here with the Spider, basically. It's giving you that opportunity to calibrate any screen, really, anything that you can connect your computers to and drive with the computer. You're running the software on the computer. That's therefore driving the color swatches in the software on the screen that you've connected to, and that's where you're reading those colors. Now, good thing is, as I say, it's been updated with this capability. one of the key things we've done, or the guys at Data have done also, is actually to add this mesh, this grid in. This was actually implemented in the Spider 4 on the Pro and the Elite versions. And what it was doing was focusing light onto the sensor. Because when you're working out and about, being able to control the lighting conditions you're in is difficult. Rule of thumb, or best advice, you should, when you're retouching, calibrate in as standardized lighting condition as possible. Keep things the same. Because if you think about it, if you're retouching in a room with lots of curtains wide open and the windows wide open, retouching in the morning, your screen is naturally going to look more washed out and dimmer than it does if you're retouching on the same screen without adjusting anything in the evening. So, best advice, close the curtains, shut the blinds, and try and neutralize the lighting conditions as much as possible. Avoid working with large colored areas around you, with a big red screen or wallpaper behind you, in a similar fashion to what we were showing you earlier on with that eye test for color management. But basically, try and keep your working conditions as neutral as possible. However, when you're out and about, you maybe can't do that. So therefore, that mesh there, that honeycomb, is cutting down light coming in from the sides. And the way the design of the device has been built now cuts down lighting from the sides as well. So therefore, what we're trying to do is make sure you get as much light directly from the screen onto the sensor array as possible. And that, in the Spider 4, previously, as I say, the Pro and the Elite versions made those pretty much the recommended tool for things like IMAX, where you have a big glass front to those devices, and therefore light can rattle around in the front. But with the new 5, we've actually increased what we did before. Basically, we've increased the depth of the grid and made it finer as well to increase that light hitting the sensors directly from the sensor. And we're up to 55% improvement in that quality of lighting there. So basically, that gives you a really good, a real big marked improvement in what you're seeing, color management-wise, basically. So hopefully that's given you an understanding of what the Spider does. This is the bit really that you can't or you shouldn't avoid. As I say, print calibration is something that you could avoid because ultimately it's something that you could potentially download profiles elsewhere for free from, and therefore do that soft proofing. But if you want to be able to check on screen, use that soft proofing process, you need to have a calibrated screen or calibrated screens. That's why the Spider 5 is really sort of the tool you can't do without. Now, good thing is it's considerably less expensive than the joys of the Spider print. It comes in 3 different flavors. They are upgradable as well. This is another key thing. So you can start with the Express. Now, the list price for that is around £115, but obviously you can shop around and get that for less money than that. But that's the sort of suggested street price is somewhere £115 for the Express. And that is ideal for doing multiple displays, but you can upgrade later on to the Pro, or you can upgrade later on to the Elite. It's the same physical device, it is just software patches between them, or software upgrades between them. Key thing that the Express doesn't have is this little white dot on the back of the Express is the ambient light sensor. So that is telling you, okay, what it's doing is it's calibrating the lighting conditions that you are in. If that isn't turned on, it isn't doing that, strangely enough. So if you are changing locations, moving around a lot, then it's not able to do it. That's one of the big benefits of the Pro, and it's why most photographers will go for the Pro if they are mobile in particular, because they've got the ambient light sensor turned on. Now, there's a few other things that you get in there as far as capabilities of adjusting things like gamma and so on, more technical stuff there, but the fundamental benefit of the Pro is, the key benefit of the Pro is definitely that ability to quickly calibrate when you get to a new environment. That's why it's a quicker recalibration time if you're calibrating the same display like your laptop, because you've got the ambient light sensor on there. And the Elite, top of the range, the Pro, by the way, usually retails somewhere around £155, but again, you can get it for less than that if you shop around. The Elite, top of the range device, more aimed at studios, more aimed at where you've got multiple different displays and multiple different operators working at the same time, and you want all those different displays to absolutely match, then you can use the Elite for that. Moreover, it does things like multi-point sampling, which sounds posh, but essentially means it's checking across the screen for hotspots, because LED screens, compared to the old CRTs we used to use, basically they have the more propensity for hot or cold spots, as they're called, i.e. brighter or darker areas on screen, just purely because it isn't one cathode ray tube that's squirting X-rays out the back and squirting electrons at the screen. It is something that is effectively a sheet, so therefore it's, you know, like any other sheet, it can have lumps and bumps in it. So the Elite really gives you the sort of quality as a result that you get from top-of-the-range ISO displays, but without the vast expense. However, saying that, let's just quickly have a look at some screen profiles, because this is important as well. I might give you some other key tips and tricks. We've had a look at sRGB and Adobe RGB. So there's Adobe RGB, as we've seen previously. There's sRGB as well. So sRGB is the color area, Adobe RGB is the white area outside of that. My laptop screen that I'm currently using is, there's a recent calibration of it. Boom. You may have seen a slight adjustment there, but just click back on sRGB. sRGB. You can see pretty much that is roughly the same as sRGB. So therefore, my delightful Retina display from Apple on my laptop is only sRGB capable. So this may answer another question for you. What do I retouch in? Well, you can set Lightroom, or you can set Photoshop to retouch in various different things. Ultimately, you'd be better off working in sRGB, would be my recommendation, if you've only got an sRGB capable screen. And this is precisely the reason why I've got this profile here, is because I've run my calibration. At the end of my calibration process, using my spider, it produces this profile, and therefore straight away I can absolutely be corrected, job done, and also produce that profile to see what it is I'm looking at, and therefore tell me, okay, do I work in Adobe RGB, do I work in sRGB? If I were, for instance, to work in Adobe RGB on a screen that is only showing me sRGB, there is roughly 25% of the color that I cannot see. So therefore, recommendation would be work on sRGB in sRGB if you're working on an sRGB display, or for instance, if you're working on a display that is Adobe RGB capable, something like an ISO display, where you've got pretty much, I don't know, 97, 98% of Adobe RGB there, then great, you've got the capability of being able to work in Adobe RGB and work in that 25% extra color. Now, key thing to mention is that the joys of the software, Mac or PC, this is the end of the Spider software here. I've just run it to calibrate my screen already. I'm not going to run you through the joys of a calibration. What I'm just going to do is click on the next, because once you run the calibration, it's done that creation. But I want you to see two pieces of the puzzle. Even via the joys of the internet on your own screens or projector, you should be able to see a difference in what I'm about to show. This is the test images to see what you are looking at and how it is before and after calibration. So actually you're going to be seeing what my screen is like before and after calibration. But here we've got some test images here. We can go into full screen mode, and if I hit the space bar, that's the calibrated view at the moment, and that is the uncalibrated view. So I just hit that back to the calibrated view and the uncalibrated view. Now, depending on what you're looking at, it may look better or worse one way or the other. Certainly on my screen, the calibrated view, she's looking far more saturated, looking more colorful, whereas in the uncalibrated view, if I were looking at that without calibrating, then I'd be tempted to go in there and warm up the image, adjust the contrast, and of course everything I'd be doing there when I then print it out wouldn't come out. Effectively, I'd be wasting my time, because it would have come out looking great in the calibrated view without me doing anything. But what I needed to do was that calibration so I could see truly what was correct on screen, and therefore when I do that soft proofing, see what's going to come out. But that's the sort of difference you can get between a calibrated and uncalibrated display. I'll just pop into the last stage of the Spider software, which allows you to see the 2D version of what we were talking about before. So if I have a look at my Apple display, let's have a look at it back in last year, but it doesn't really matter. If I compare that, at the moment it's telling me that Apple display is 98% of sRGB, but if I compare that to Adobe RGB, it is indeed 75% of Adobe RGB. So as I say, about 25% less than the color space of Adobe RGB. And you can compare that with other screens. So I can add in other screens here, either the same screen at a different point in time, or for instance, maybe different types of manufacturers' screens. Let's have a look at there's that ISO screen. It's again telling us we've got 94% of Adobe RGB with that ISO screen. Well, let's have a look at something like my Cintiq. So the Wacom Cintiq, great tablet, 27-inch Cintiq there. That's 94% of Adobe RGB as well, although you can see it's slightly different, the amount of colors it's showing, basically. So important to see what you are working in, and important to see, important to get to that calibration. Hopefully that's now coming across. So we've kind of looked through a large chunk of what we're looking at, what we've been talking about here today, folks. There is an area that we haven't covered off yet, and that is capture calibration. So what we're looking at is, okay, different ways in which we can make sure that front end of the workflow, the bit in camera, comes in correctly. I capture things correctly, basically. So let's have a look at that, and how do we do that? How do we get to that situation of seeing what's captured correctly? Because, let's say back in that example of our rhino, and we wanted to get the capture, the color of the rhino, and the capture the color of the bird here. I'm not sure what the heck that bird is now. But whatever it is, we wanted to get that correct, or we wanted to get our giraffe correct, whatever it may be. Great. All very well and good us saying, okay, I can soft proof and we can therefore know how things are going to come out. Great. And I'm looking at a color corrected screen. I've calibrated my screen, so I'm seeing the correct colors on screen. What that isn't telling me, though, is what color was this giraffe in the first place? What are the correct colors? So for that, we need to start adding in a frame of reference at the front end of the workflow. Now, a frame of reference could be something as simple as a gray card, where effectively you use your white balance tool and press that, click that onto some sort of white card out there. Now, downside is using something like a white card. By the very nature of the beast, it is a card, so therefore that can be susceptible to creasing, mucking up, getting blown away, for instance, as well. So from that point of view, it'd be nice to have an alternative solution. What we're trying to do here is let's quickly just have a quick couple of minute pause. And 2 seconds, folks. Be back with you in a second. Turn me back on again, so hopefully you can hear at that end. Great.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Cheers. Hi, folks. Right, sorry about that. I gather we lost, in particular, the guys in Camberley there, so they were able to phone in and tell me. For those others out there, if there is any others watching, you may have lost me for a few minutes there, but we're back again now. So we were at that point, I believe, where we talked about the joys of the spider and calibration on the spider, and we were telling you about how that's getting your screens correct. But now what we're trying to do is get you to the situation where you're capturing things correctly. So therefore, in the situation where, okay, I've got, as mentioned, something like the joys of my my giraffe here, for instance, that I'm looking at. I can soft proof this. I can see how it's going to come out and print. And provided I'm looking at a calibrated screen, I can check that, okay, I know that what I'm looking at is what I'm going to get on print. What it's not telling me is what do we get in the first place? What was the color of that giraffe when we first took it? What color was the color of the giraffe's tongue, for instance? So therefore, what I need to be able to do is add something in at the front end of our workflow as a frame of reference. So popping back into the joys of our presentation there, we need to be able to see something at stage 1 or 2, i.e. something we can capture out there, which gives us a frame of reference. Now that could be, for instance, a piece of paper, a grey card, for instance. So that's where we're dropping in something that, with our white balance tools in things like Lightroom and Photoshop, we can click on that, and if it is pure white or grey, more to the point, no elements of colour in there, then great, we know we have something that's setting our white balance to. If that white card appears anything apart from grey or white, i.e. there's some inherent colour in there, some coloration, what that's telling us is that there is coloration perhaps down to the lighting conditions we're in, or other circumstances that basically causing a colour cast to our image, a change in perhaps temperature to the image. So therefore, what we're doing with our white balance is we're saying, okay, give us a known grey reference, and if we're seeing any colour in there, we're going to remove it. The software is going to remove it based on that, or perhaps in camera as well, you can be doing this. Downside with using a piece of paper, downside with using a grey card, is that those grey cards, those pieces of paper, can get mucked up quite quickly, quite easily, because by the nature of the beast, they are cards, they are pieces of paper, they can get creased, they can get coffee spilt on them, etc., etc. As soon as they're not true white stroke grey, we seem to be having some problems again. Bear with me, folks. How you put it? Unusual for us to get feedback from the audience, and thanks for that, the guys in Cambly. Boris, the guys over there are telling us that they've only got the first slide on screen, so therefore I don't know whether we've frozen.
The goal, have you just stop the screen sharing and start again? You see.
Can you see me moving on now to the
no
references slide?
Maybe you have frozen it.
Yeah, maybe I have. So let me just have a quick
Please
look
check.
into. Yeah, I'm doing.
You did, right?
There we go. The joys of technology. Must be another shortcut button that I didn't know about. Thanks, folks. There we are. We're now back in the land of you being able to see things, I think. So, Boris, you can now see me.
No,
just check.
no. Yeah, now I can see. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. And you're seeing the missing references.
Spider cube slide. Yeah. Please continue.
Great stuff. Right, thanks, guys. Well, there you are. Very, very nice to get some feedback there, and hopefully that's now resolved any issues that some of the shortcuts have allowed me to freeze the screen earlier on. So, returning to the point in case, what we're trying to do is give us a frame of reference. Now, hopefully, even though the slide was frozen there, you're being able to hear me talking through the reason, what we need, which is that frame of reference, which is something like a grey card. However, there is something better. Let's say, and let's give you an example. In this example, we've got a whole bunch of leaves, and we can't necessarily see what we took at the time. We can see the leaves. We know that they're limeish green leaves, perhaps on a beige background. But do we know that? It's kind of like that giraffe. We could see the giraffe, but do we know what color it was in the first place? Because ultimately, if there is some sort of effect in there down to the joys of, for instance, lighting conditions or different types of lights, that actual same image and any other images could have actually been a number of different types of setup. An actual, the leaves could actually have been a light green. Now, this is something we need to take into account. And this is something where, as I say, a frame of reference like a grey card is good, but not as good as it could be if we had something like a cube. Now, a cube is a superb version of a grey card. It is actually physically a a cube. So it's a plasticized or resin plasticized cube. So it's a solid three-dimensional device, and therefore it's scratch resistant. It's not going to fold. It's not going to crease. It's something you could wipe off if it got stained, for instance. It's something that is tripod mountable. This little cylinder down the bottom here, you could actually connect to a tripod or a lighting mount, and you could also hang this device into, in this instance I hung it into some leaves here, so we can see it being hung into its circumstances, so we can sit it in there. So it isn't going to blow away, it isn't going to get creased and folded up when you put it in your pocket, and therefore what was a grey suddenly becomes a grey, brown, bluey colour. It's something you can use as a frame of reference. So how does it work? Well, let's quickly show you. Let's pop out of here and let's go into the joys, in this case of, well, let's go into Camera Raw actually. So we're going to put this up in Camera Raw just for a bit of variety. Again, you could use this in pretty much anything where you've got a white balance tool or a grey balance tool and the ability to adjust exposure and shadow end, because that's predominantly what we're going to be adjusting at the moment, basically. So let's just pop this over into Camera Raw, and we can see here we've got our outer gamut warnings on. So we've got our little cursor on the top right hand corner of our histogram here, turns on anything that's over 100%, you're going to get a red warning on. And likewise we've got our blue outer gamut warning for over or under 100%, 0% dots, i.e. 100% black. And you can see here it's on, but there is no black. Now there should be a blue warning for outer gamut in that hole there, because that hole is indeed 100% black. That is a reference point for using for 100% black. So something you can't get again on a card is 100% because there is nothing there, therefore it should be black. And you want to get your black values correct, because otherwise you can end up wasting ink, for instance, again, if you're printing out, or certainly not getting the right contrast levels. So at the moment we know that our exposure, we can see from the histogram, is all to the right-hand side, so therefore this is a very overexposed shot. And we can see that these values here, this white, which actually I'm going to tell you now, and we know is a 96% white, is over 100% because that red warning is on there. Ironically, it's not on in this little white triangle here. Now these two white triangles are exactly the same. These two grey triangles are exactly the same. They're an 18% grey. But the lighting conditions are causing them to look different in this image. And that's very important. Because one of the things with a grey card, if you're using it, you're advised to do, again, we're trying to use the same references for everybody out there. One of the things about the grey card is you're supposed to angle it at 45 degrees to the strongest light source. Now, that's important because, again, we're trying to get the same values being used and the same standards being used throughout the industry. So this is a generic what you should do with a grey card as taught in various different schools, colleges across the country. And the reason for that is, as you move a grey card, if you think perhaps it's an 18% grey on that card, actually with the light hitting it from an angle, as you turn it to and from that angle, it's going to affect the value and therefore affect what you're doing as far as exposure, as far as any grey balancing is concerned. So that's why with a cube, one of the benefits of it being cubic is, as opposed to you having to worry about not only sitting a card without it blowing away, without it falling over, and angling it correctly to 45 degrees of the light. With the cube, you can easily hang it in there, sit it in there, or tripod mount it in there, and have one of the two exactly the same sides at 45 degrees to the strongest light source. And therefore, when setting your white balance, which is the first thing we're going to do here with the white balance tool up on the top left-hand corner, all we need to do is choose the lighter side, i.e. the one in this case with the outer gamut warning on, to set our white balance, and it will remove that color cast from our image. So straight away we're removing out the temperature changes, the color temperature changes down to, in this case, the lighting conditions. However, we are still overexposed. Now we're still getting a bit of red up here in this what is a silvery ball here. In fact, that is supposed to be the only place on your guide where you're going to get 100% white potentially. So remember, what we're doing is we're popping in here something that's going to act as a frame of reference. All the adjustments we're going to make to this image to get the image looking correct, we're going to save, once again as our old friend, a preset, and then we're going to apply that to any other images shot in this lighting conditions to remove the same color cast, the same exposure adjustments and the same shadow adjustments to get the image looking correct, and therefore all the rest of the image is looking correct. So I've already removed the color cast, but I can see, okay, I've still got a little bit of this red here, so I know that this white cube, or this white triangle rather here, isn't correct at the moment. I know it's still over 100% slightly. So I need to drop that down now. I need to get it down to 96% dots, or this little area here under the histogram gives you the RGB values. Now it should be reading 244 to read 96%, so 244 across the RG and B, or sort of an average of that. So all I'm going to do is use my exposure slider to drop that exposure down until that hits in that white area there, somewhere around 244. There you go, you've got 244, 244, 246. So roughly on average about 244. So we now know we've got our exposure correct, and the histogram's looking a lot healthier as well, basically. So it's a lot more spread out rather than being all lumped over on the right-hand side. However, I am still not getting 100% black or 0% dots in my hole here. So I know that around here, this little area around the hole should be a 4% dot. And at the moment it's reading, well, 29, to read a 4% dot, it should be reading 10, 10, 10 as RGB values. Now, I hasten to add in Lightroom. Once again, it's easier to be doing this because it gives you percentage values, but Camera Raw works in RGB values. So we need to drop down now something to get the right contrast, the right shadow end detail. So, in fact, I'm going to use the black slider as opposed to the exposure slider. So, the exposure slider is now changed to get the highlight correct. So, I'm now dropping down that black slider until that black hole fills in. Basically, I know when I've got somewhere around there just filling in, that value there, on average, is going to be around 10 as far as the value of the black around the outside of that hole is concerned now. So now I've got the correct values of exposure, cast removal, and shadow on screen for that shot. I just need to save those and apply that wherever else I might need it. So let me just go to this little very innocuous looking drop down menu here and hit Save Settings, and we'll call that the Save Cube Tuesday 1. Click on Save, and then we've saved that preset. And now, of course, again, I can then apply that or any other presets to this image or any other images that basically I'm working on to correct those, the lighting conditions, the temperature conditions that we've got being inherent on the image, and it's correcting for that situation. So hopefully that's giving you a means by which you can now capture everything correctly at the front end of your workflow as well. I mean, it's a cube basically, as I say. It's a nice solid device. It's tripod mountable. It's something that you can work on and really just have it in your pocket, because it's about the size of, well, it's about 4 centimeters or 2 inches across the diameter there on each of the faces. So you know, it's a nice pocketable device, and you know, comes in that nice solid scratch-resistant format that means it isn't going to get mucked up just by popping it in your pocket, as some of the fold-up grey cards out there would do. So hopefully that's giving you an idea of how you can improve that situation there. What we'll do now is just lastly look at one last scenario, basically, and that is the one that's very familiar perhaps to any of us that are working in wedding situations or in things like events or sports photography, wildlife photography. Not the situation where you just need to remove out color casts and get your exposure correct, but where you need to get your colors absolutely correct. So where you need to get the color of the dress, the color of the suit, the color of the food, the color of whatever it is correct, and where, of course, in mixed lighting, in particular in things like weddings, where you're getting some shots outside, some shots inside, some shots in the church, you're getting a whole profusion of different lighting conditions. You need to be able to neutralize that. Well, that's where we've got something as a big brother of the cube called the spider checker. Now, I use the term big brother very definitely here because, of course, the spider checker is quite a large device, as you can see there with the model holding it. It's about the size of a tablet computer folded out, so it actually folds in two down the center line there, but basically that's giving you something that you can pop into your shoots, either get your subjects to hold it, or once again, fortunately, it's tripod mountable, so you can tripod mount it and get that into your shoots and be able to shoot it. And it gives you not just 4 or 5 grey values to set your, or remove any color cast, but also to set your highlight and shadow, your exposure and your contrast with, it's giving you 48 colors. So therefore, 48 swatches of color and grey and white in order to do not just grey values, but the whole color curve calibration. Now, important thing here is it is quite big, and that's because it needs to be quite big, because if, like most of us, you're metering in camera, then when you take a shot of your spider checker or your color guide, you need to have something big enough that if you're, for instance, doing group scenes or landscapes or something from a distance, you want to have the camera shooting that with the frame held open such that it's capturing the area you will be shooting later on or have already shot. Because important thing to say, you can shoot this before or after your relevant shots of whatever subject it is you're taking. So in my case, if I'm out doing wildlife photography, I'll drop this in and shoot it at a point during the early part of the shoot, and then I'll wait for anything to appear, and then I'll be shooting it later on. Shooting those subjects later on, but I've already captured this, so therefore I can correct the colors down to that scenario to get the colors correct later when in post-process. But the key thing is, if I'm metering in camera, I need to capture the area I'm going to shoot. There are other devices out there, little things that have been launched over the years, which are, purport to be, again, sort of color cards. If they're small, it's no good unless you're doing something like basically really close-up work like macro photography or, for instance, product photography on a desk. Because if you need to zoom in camera in order to get more than 1 pixel per dot of your color chart, you're going to end up actually metering for the color chart and not for the conditions you're in, so defeating the entire object. So beware, use something. Well, use the spider checker would be my recommendation because it's big enough to shoot. Now let's scare you with some of my photographs again. In this case, moving away from some of the stuff I've taken out in the great outdoors, I'm going to be showing you a classic situation, i.e. a wedding scenario, where, and I am no wedding photographer, folks, as you can already very evidently see. But what I am is somebody who took a spider checker along and therefore captured the different lighting conditions for these different shoots. So inside the church, outside the church, in the reception, evidently strong color differences, strong temperature differences. So we know we need to make some corrections here. But more to the point, we need to get the colors correct. We need to get the colors of the jackets correct, the colors correct, and we need to get them correct in every lighting condition. So we're running out of time, but I'm very quickly going to run through this. We quickly shoot. If we're doing a group scene like this, we shoot it. So we've got this spider checker, say about a tenth of the frame size down the bottom here. We then zoom in. I've done this already, so I'm going to rush through this. Zoom in and crop in software. So we're only getting the spider checker in shot, basically. So there we go. That's now in shot. We then do 3 things very quickly. We go into the develop module. If we're in Lightroom, for instance, we quickly do what we would have done with the cube. So we're doing the same process to start off with. We're removing any overall color cast by just clicking on one of the gray squares there, and that's removing any overall color cast. We're then going up to the 2 squares that we do need to know the values for, and they're exactly the same values as we needed to know on the spider cube, and that is value number 1 up here is 96. And if we look at the histogram on the right hand side, as mentioned, it actually gives you percentage values in Lightroom. So you can see 96, 96.1, 96.1, so roughly 96. The exposure is correct. If it weren't, we do the same thing as we did previously. We'd adjust using the exposure slider to get the exposure correct. Down the bottom, we've got the shadow end. Now that should be roughly 4% again. So it's 96 and 4, the only 2 values out of these 48 colors you need to know. And it's again approximately correct. If it weren't, we'd use again the black slider to get that correct. However, now the big bit that does the work for you. So at the moment we've done effectively just the same as we would have done if we were using the cube. But the spider checker comes with its own app, basically, which is a plugin for various software, obviously Lightroom, Photoshop. So therefore, I've got down here the joys of my spider checker app. I'm going to boot up my spider checker app, and I'm going to quickly. It's going to create once again a proof copy of the Lightroom. That's just a function of Lightroom there, not the spider checker app. But it's quickly opening up. Okay, oops, don't want to be doing an update just now, but we'll just pop back in there. Sorry about that. we're quickly open up the Spider Checker app window. So there's the app window. You can see in the background there's the cropped photo, which we've now opened in the app. You see those little squares? Those are our sample points. What we're doing here is we're laying a sample point over every one of those bigger squares. As soon as we hit Save Calibration, what it will do is create a preset automatically, popping it into Lightroom in this case. Excuse me. And therefore, it's giving you that preset calibration of every one of those 48 squares. So what it's doing is something you couldn't physically do yourself. It's reading, for instance, the red of this square here, and if the red isn't correct, it's adjusting the color curve to make that red correct. If you were doing this manually, that would of course move out the green, because you then go to the green and read the green, and okay, that wouldn't be correct, so you'd move colors to get the green correct, and of course that would move the red out. You'd be continually chasing your tail. The only way you can correct correctly is by reading all 48 points at the same time and correcting all 48 points at the same time. And it's simple. All you need to do is just pop in a name, as mentioned. Let's give it a name, Cal3, whatever. Click on OK. There we are. I've now created, obviously already created one previously, but that's it. That is now my correction done. So I pop down here in my presets folder again. We can see we've got the output presets still in there that we looked at earlier on. There's that new one somewhere down here that we looked at for output, but we're not talking output at the moment. We're talking capture. So we're getting your images caught, captured, brought in, color correctly at the front end. So if I hit Cal3, that will change this image very slightly. There was a very slight color cast here. But the good thing here is what we're doing with these particular presets is we're actually creating a preset as opposed to affecting your camera calibration, which of course would be specific to your lens and camera, and therefore pretty arduous if you have multiple cameras to create a preset for the lighting conditions you're in, and not every camera. So basically, another good thing about creating a preset is I can pop them together into a little folder. So I can say, okay, let's actually pop these into this little folder here. I can archive that off with my shots if I want to. And you can already see the effects that we're getting here. So if I go into our outside shot, so there's our outside shot, and let's apply our outside correction. Boom. You can see a correction there. If I hit the Y key again, you can see the before and after. And if I zoom in, you can see here where the groomsmen, for instance, are wearing grey waistcoats and ties. But actually, previously it was appearing sort of bluey white, certainly on my screen, maybe different on yours. The jackets are definitely grey, but then previously we've been looking at it was looking sort of light blue, perhaps. And the skin tones are obviously being affected as well. Everything is being corrected here. Now, the good thing is, that's come from one direction, but from a different direction, the lighting conditions in the church. I've again shot the Spider Checker once in the church, and later on, I may have done it after the wedding or before. In this case, I did it before, but in the church, I can then click on the in the church correction, and once again correct. I've come from different color casts, different effects. But once again, I'm getting that situation where my lighting conditions have been taken into account, and my correction has been made compared to what we saw previously. So there's the before, there's the after. So we're getting that calibration absolutely spot on. And lastly, of course, in the choice of the reception, again, I can use the inside reception preset that I've corrected, and boom, correct. Absolutely captured correctly. Again, compared to that very overly red situation. So hopefully that's given you a couple of different levels where you can go to for calibration at the front end. That's all working together as part of a whole different area, the calibration at the front end. There's also things like lens calibration we could talk about at some other stage, basically. We're going to run out of time today, but I'm just going to wrap it up now and say, look, if what you've seen today makes you think I need to get calibrated across the board, then at least I can give you some advice to save you some money, because there's something called the Spider Studio, which includes the Spider Cube, includes the Spider Elite, the top of the range Spider for screen calibration, and includes the Spider Print, and saves you roughly about £100 compared to the individual list prices of everything out there. So if you consider that the The Spider print on its own is say SRP of $299. Spider Studio, Spider 5 Studio, one to look out for. And at the moment, I've seen them out there probably for about £350 on the marketplace, so only about 50 quid more, and you're getting the top of the range Spider and the Cube into the bargain as well. And the top range Spider, if you recall, is about actually about £225. I don't think I mentioned the cost of the Spider Elite. So you're getting that whole package for just about 50 quid more than the Spider print itself. So if that's relevant, there you go. Hopefully that's giving you a bit of a guidance as far as you know, how to get a bit of a deal. But basically, we're now in that joys of the last dying embers of the presentation, folks. So I'm going to wrap up with a few bits and pieces for you. If you've been inspired today by some of the calibration side of things, and you do want to get something, you know, at least something like a Spider, and get in there with a Spider Express at that entry-level starting point. If you get any of the Spider products, if you go to the URL on screen now, so datacolor.com/Adobe 2015-UK, I believe this promotion is still running. It may, unfortunately, I'm saying this now, I prepped last night, it was running then. It may have run out today, actually, folks, so go and have a look. You might have the opportunity, you might not now, of getting 20% off the photography plan from Adobe. So that gives you 20% off of the joys of the Photoshop, Lightroom, and other bits of their photography plan bundle. Normally costs about $8.95 a month, so this brings it down to about 7 quid. But let me know if that isn't working. Come back to me on that, or come back to us on that. Maybe we can inspire our friends at Adobe to extend that for you if it has timed out now. I will point you to some of our other friends out there, the Photographer Academy. They run a whole bunch of training videos now. Their training videos also include videos from myself. So if you do need to have more detail than what we've somewhat rushed through today as far as how to work any of color management solutions, or a whole bunch of other different types of tips and tricks, and you can actually get some discounts off of their video courses online at their setup. Those discount codes are Data60 and Data20 give you discounts off of their pro and their business levels. But if you need any quick tips and tricks, you can also see yours truly there. Indeed, if you haven't seen me already, that is me. If you go to YouTube and type in Next Tech, N-E-X-T-T-E-K, and search for Next Tech, you'll see a whole bunch of different product videos, which I've put together, and we've done with various other parties out there as well. So you've got some camera calibration stuff and stuff like that. By the way, when you go to YouTube, because there's lots of things called Next Tech out there, you might need to make sure it's looking for Next Tech with 2 T's and no C in there. But they're all free. Another freebie, if you want to get our free ebook, then the URL at the bottom there gives you, I think it's 93 gripping pages of color management tips and tricks. So it's a free, but you just have to pop in your details to download it. And when you do that, you can obviously register for our webinars. So if you do want to see any of our other webinars with guest photographers and so on out there, then that gives you the opportunity to be doing that. I think we've got some coming up with various different gentlemen, guest photographers in the not too distant, so we'll keep an eye on our website for that sometime soon. But that URL there, as I say, gives you the link for getting the ebook and more information on color management. The last thing I'm going to wrap up with the joys of the European telephone support line. If we're going to open up very shortly for a few minutes, and I may even call into the guys and girls in Camberley after this as well, just to speak to you in person. But we'll have the chat area open or the questions area open on the screen very shortly, so you can type in your questions. But if we don't manage to get a chance to answer all of your questions today, folks, there is also that free phone number, 00800 700 870. It is 2 zeros at the start because it is a European free phone number. Or go to that URL and you get the joys of you get the joys of the opportunity to pop a ticket into our system again via our website to ask questions. That is it, folks. I'm going to remind you we do have other webinars coming up in the not too distant future, which will be more open ones with guest photographers on there. And I will just say thank you at this point for your time, and we'll open up the questions now for those of